You're listening to The Secrets of Star Trek, where we discuss the hidden layers and deeper meanings found in all the Star Trek TV series, movies, and more. Today we're discussing the third season, Next Generation episode, The Enemy. I'm Dom Bettinelli, and joining me today on the panel is Father Cory Sticha. Hey, Father.
How's it going?
Very well, thanks. And folks, be sure to stick around to the end of the episode. We have lots of listener feedback we want to share with you. And we want to encourage you to share the podcast with your friends to help us grow this community, reach more listeners. There's so much going on in Star Trek, so much new Star Trek. We want to make sure we get to share that with a lot of people. So we do appreciate that. And another show on the StarQuest Network you're sure to enjoy is Pray Station Portable, which is a prayer opportunity. You can pray the Divine Office of the Catholic Church, also called the Liturgy of the Hours.
Yep.
Escaped me for a second there. And you can pray that with the whole church every day using the Pray Station Portable podcast. You can find that wherever fine podcasts are found or at sqpn.com/PSP. All right, so we are discussing The Enemy, and Jimmy couldn't be with us this week, but we have one of his patented recaps. So here we go. This week, Next Generation does Enemy Mine, and there's lots of conking going on. I wonder if that's a typo. I'm not sure what you...
Conking isn't getting conked on the head.
Oh, okay. There's lots of people getting conked on the head. A landing party beams down to an empty, storm-racked Federation planet, where they find wreckage from a Romulan ship that conked out when it hit the planet. Okay, I get it. They discover a survivor who was injured because of all the conking he received in the crash. They beam the survivor up to the ship, but Geordi is stranded on the planet. It turns out that to continue surviving, the Romulan survivor needs a substance that is found only in Worf's body, and Worf won't give it up, and Picard won't order him to do so. So the Romulan survivor stops surviving and dies. This causes a Romulan rescue ship, commanded by recurring character, Commander Tomalak, to nearly open fire and maybe start a war. Meanwhile, down on the planet, Geordi is conked on the head by another Romulan survivor. He takes Geordi prisoner, but then the Romulan is conked on the head by a rockfall. The electromagnetic environment is messing both with Geordi's visor and the Romulan's nervous system, but they end up cooperating so that they can find a probe that Wesley sent down to the planet. And at the last minute, the Enterprise is able to beam them back up. So, with the return of the new survivor, Picard is able to convince Tomalak not to open fire and maybe start a war. The end. All right, your overall impression of this one?
Well, it's an episode. It's not a great episode. It's not a bad episode, but it's. I mean, like Jimmy mentioned in his summary, it's Enemy Mine. This is a plot line that's been done a bazillion times in a bazillion different scenarios. It's not badly done. It's done fine. The two enemies have to work together to survive, and of course, in convenient ways that they have to work together. The highlight, of course, is Tomalak and Picard.
Yes.
That is always such a great rivalry, such a great interactions between the two of them. But that's literally the highlight of the episode is Picard and Tomalak.
And this is the first Tomalak episode, by the way. This is the first time he shows up.
It is. That's right.
Yeah.
So they don't know them yet. Yeah.
The great Andreas Katsulas, who is also probably best known for Babylon 5, being Jakar on Babylon 5.
Yep.
He's quite a great actor. I really enjoy him. It's all
him roles. And Patrick Stewart work so well together in those roles.
Oh yeah. I mean, he is becomes the epitome of the Romulan sneaky, captain, just he really defines.
Rash and aggressive at times, and all of a sudden, he's so endearing, and it was such a smile. It's such a simple mistake.
In some ways, he's the prototype of Gul Dukat in DS9, because Dukat is similar in a lot of those ways, although Dukat is very much his own character, but similar things, like sometimes he's smooth and endearing, other times he's really brash and aggressive, and
exactly.
It's interesting. So I agree with you. I mean, Star Trek alone has done this sort of thing many times. Two people stranded on a planet who have to work together. They might be an enemy, they might not be enemies, but the better one is Darmok and Jalad.
Yep.
Darmok and Jalad at Tanagra, that sort of thing. But we've seen this many times, so it's nothing new, and we'll see it again in the future. But it's okay here. I mean, there are some interesting moral and ethical questions that get raised, and we could talk about that more as we go through it. But it was okay. I agree with you. It's kind of forgettable. I didn't remember it until I watched it. I'm like, oh yeah, it's this one. Yeah.
Yeah. As soon as I saw the thumbnail on Paramount Plus, it's like, oh yeah, I know exactly which one this is.
You know, the interesting question that rose for me was, as I watched this, how would this be different if it was someone other than Geordi who got stranded? So, if it were Riker, what if it were Worf? In fact, I feel like Worf getting stranded with the Romulan would have been an interesting...
That would have been a much more interesting story. Now, it wouldn't have been a story of cooperation.
Well, it might have ended up
unless
as
it was
one.
Forced to,
Yeah.
They were both injured or something like that. Yeah, that's a good question. That probably would have been a more interesting story.
Right.
Especially Worf having to give up his absolute hatred for all Romulans and not wanting to work with Romulans.
Right.
To survive. Because you do have that contrast in here between Geordi having to work with the Romulan to survive and Worf not willing to even just contribute a little bit of his blood.
Yeah, right.
To help the Romulan.
Nothing that he has, it cost him nothing to do it. And I suppose that's one of the reasons why it's not Worf down there and it's Geordi. I mean, Geordi is an interesting choice because Geordi is so easygoing. He's everybody's pal. I mean, he's just the engineer. He's not Riker, who's the hero character. He's not Data, who's just very unemotional.
Yep.
And so it's kind of an interesting choice to have it be Geordi.
Yeah, I do think Riker though would come to the realization very quickly that he'd be the one. He'd be arguing very strongly that we need to work together. I mean, but he wouldn't put up with the Romulan either, though. I mean, he wouldn't like Geordi, just fine, whatever. We'll just sit here. That would be Riker. He'd be arguing the whole time.
Yes, that's true. Actually, another Lower Decks did that episode where there were all these different people from all the ships that had been stolen by Tom Paris. Not Tom Paris, but you know what I mean. Nick Locarno. They all had to cooperate together on that planet to survive. So that was a similar circumstance. And to see how Mariner handled it very differently, which is kind of interesting to think about.
That was a fun episode.
So I did think it was funny that Riker didn't recognize the Romulan alphabet on he had to point out, what's that writing on the wreckage? Oh, it's Romulan. If you're a Starfleet officer, if you're a naval officer of the U.S. Navy, you recognize Cyrillic. You know what I mean?
Well, I thought it was more of the sense of, oh, look at that. Boy, that looks familiar, doesn't it?
Okay. Yeah. Oh, it's Romulan.
Because I thought he phrased it like, so Worf, do you recognize this? That kind of deal. More of the sense of course we know what this is. It'd be like, during the Cold War, you see the red hammer and sickle on a plane. Right. It's like, gee, I wonder where that came from.
Yeah, Riker does say, recognize those markings, Worf? So, yeah, it was more
the sense, kind of
check
sarcastic
out those markings. Oh, okay, that makes more sense. The planet is Galorndon Core. That's the name of it. And man, does this show up a lot through Star Trek from this point on, including during Discovery. It was the site of a Klingon occupation during that war.
Yeah.
So it's kind of funny how they keep returning to this planet as a strategic location, and it's kind of funny because it's it's inhospitable to life for sure.
Yeah,
but yet it is this key strategic location that everyone wants to hold: Romulans, Federation, Klingons.
Yep.
So thought it was interesting. Another interesting thing is Dr. Crusher in this episode. And they really make her in TNG, maybe in later seasons it's not as bad, but she's kind of naive so often. Mm-hmm. And in this episode, she's really naive. Like just when they bring the Romulan survivor aboard, and Worf very sensibly says, "Post a guard in the in sick bay to his security guy," and she's like, he's not going anywhere, Worf. And it's like,
But
it just makes sense.
Well, and not just, posting a guard at the door. It's like, no, you will be eyes on him at all times. Which, by the way, they do that nowhere near enough on TNG, where the guard is actually looking at the person they're supposed to be guarding. And so, of course, they get surprised when the guy figures out a way to escape.
Exactly. But we do this today, if a criminal is brought to the hospital, they post an officer outside the door or even in the room, like it's just to watch him.
Well, actually, I've got some experience with that, where when I did my clinical pastoral education, which is a training that a lot of times that seminarians will go through to learn how to do hospital visits, basically, how to go, and interact with people that are, in the hospital. And I had one patient I had to visit who he was a prisoner from the local county jail. And they had an officer who, like, in plain clothes, but had his badge on and everything. He was just in there reading a magazine or whatever, but he was there in the room with a weapon. Make sure and the guy wasn't going anywhere. I think he was pretty much a petty criminal, robbery or something like that, something simple.
Right. But even then, it makes sense to have somebody there. Yep, I agree. So, yeah. And she just acts so naive throughout the rest of this story, too, that Crusher does. It's sort of an odd thing.
That scene where she calls Worf down to sick bay. He's going to die soon if you don't do it. And Worf's like, let him die.
You realize Worf is a Klingon, right?
Yeah.
He's likely to grab him by the ears and stare into his eyes and roar at him as he dies.
Well, that's like the Romulan grabs his sash and pulls him forward, and Worf is just staring at him. He doesn't care.
Yeah, right, exactly. It is kind of it's silly on Dr. Crusher's part. Because she treats Worf like he's a human, but he's not. He's a Klingon. And with all of that comes with.
He is human influenced. I mean, he did live on Earth with a human family, but yeah, he's still very much Klingon. He's actually more Klingon than a lot of Klingons we see in TNG sometimes.
Yes. One of the great things about Worf is the ideal Klingon, which is a realistic thing you see sometimes, where it's the person who didn't get to be that growing up.
Yep.
Yet it's part of their heritage, and so they want to be that much more even than the people who grew up that way.
Exactly.
You can see that in some cultures. So it's kind of interesting to see that here. I did like that. I did like Geordi's ingenuity. That was kind of fun when he was stuck in the hole and he uses he makes basically pythons or whatever to climb up out of the hole. Plus demonstrates some serious upper body strength.
Oh, no kidding. No kidding. I'm watching that and my muscles start burning just watching that.
Yes.
I mean, again, it was one of those convenient thing of, of course there just happens to be some, metal ore sitting there that he could just happen to take and turn into. But still the idea of, okay, I've got this metal ore and I can use my phaser to melt it and to form it into these spikes to then use to climb. I mean, that was good. That is good. Yeah.
Yeah. I like that. So let's talk about the Worf's refusal to. Mm-hmm. So this Romulan that's on the ship is dying, and he needs a transfusion of ribosomes, which is apparently something that works with our RNA and proteins and stuff. And everyone has them. We have them. Yep. So Worf refuses to give up anything of himself, which at no cost to him, it would cost him nothing to do so, because of his feelings about the Romulans who killed his people. And as Crusher points out, not this Romulan, but in particular, just Romulans in general. Let's consider the moral, ethical, and legal aspects of this. Like he can't be forced to give up his body parts.
Right.
So legally, even in the military, they can't order it.
Yep.
But what do you think of the moral and ethical? Like, was it moral and ethical for him to refuse? Was he well within morality to refuse?
I would say that as Christians, we would say he wasn't, because of course, love your neighbor means loving your enemy. And, Romulans are the enemies. And as Christians, we would say, no, if we were in this situation where, China's the big bad guy right now. So, this Chinese soldier is injured and, we're called to give some blood to save him. Ethically, morally, we would say, yeah, we should still do that. Now, that doesn't mean that we're going to be friends with this guy and he is going to go through, war tribunals or whatever is necessary, spend time in military prison or whatever. But we still are ethically required to save them. That's why, for example, medics on the battlefield are required to treat prisoners. And it doesn't matter how brutal that particular prisoner of war is. He still has to be treated by him, regardless.
Right.
Same thing. Chaplains have to go and serve as serve them as chaplains. Why, by the way, chaplains don't carry firearms under the Geneva Convention.
Right.
For the same reason. So I would say absolutely morally that, as Christians, we would say, no, you need to, especially if it's just giving a little bit of blood so they can replicate these ribosomes.
I felt like in some ways the writer left an out here. Worf is making a bad choice, and we're seeing one of our characters do something bad, right? I mean, that's what Worf is doing. I mean, he thinks he's in the right, but we see morally and ethically he's wrong. But they kind of give him an out because the Romulan refuses to take it. Like he wouldn't. Right. I wouldn't want it anyway. And I feel like that sort of lets Worf off the hook a little bit.
Yeah, it does, but it's still Worf is being stubborn, and they do give Worf an out too when he's telling Picard, "I will do it if you order me to, but I'm not going to volunteer to do it." Right, and by the way, that would be an opening where, in my opinion, I'm not a lawyer, and definitely not a military lawyer. Picard would have an opening to say, "Well, good. You said you will do it if I give you an order, therefore I'm giving you the order."
Right. Picard would probably, it might be technically a violation of the law, would probably be allowed given the circumstances. Yeah. But Picard is willing to risk war with the Romulans in order to not order Worf to do this. I wonder, I don't know if that feels realistic to me.
I try to put it in, a modern context. Would ordering U.S. soldiers to give blood to save an Iranian, a Chinese, a Russian enemy, to put in modern context, would that be the same kind of thing? Would that prevent? First of all, would that prevent the war? Would our enemies say, well, you didn't save this soldier, even though you tried, and because your guy didn't give his blood, we're going to attack your base now.
Right. Or just the fact that the guy died in your custody.
Yeah, he died in your custody. Yeah. So I mean, that might be setting up a little bit of a different scenario. I mean, we are talking about a different culture, the Romulans versus, another human culture too. So,
yeah. I just felt like a Picard of a different era, movie era or later, might have said, Worf, get over yourself, do this because you have a higher duty to prevent this war and to, safeguard your fellow crew, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
So, yeah. Anyway, I feel like it was a little out of character for Picard, but we wanted to create the drama.
This Picard definitely is more trying to find the peaceful solutions.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, later Picard becomes a little more pragmatic and cynical. But yeah, I know they wanted to up the drama, and that was one of the things, and to make the choice all about Worf's choice.
Right. And again, to contrast Worf in the Romulan versus Geordi in the Romulan on the planet.
Right, because on the planet, the Romulan is being unreasonable with Geordi, because it's like, look, help me, and we can go get out of here if you would just trust me for a moment. Right. I'm not going to shoot you. I have no desire to shoot you. I just want to get home. Yeah. And the Romulan is all about, no, I'm doing my duty.
I love, though, where the Romulan won't tell Geordi his name, so he just starts calling him Commodore. Okay, Commodore.
Which ticks him off enough for him to give his name. Yeah, that was good. There's this whole moment too where we see this cultural difference where the Romulan is aghast that Geordie's parents let him live with a birth defect.
Yep.
But of course, Geordie proves, having this birth defect allows me actually to be even better than a normal person would be with, because I've got the visor and all that. Maybe you should consider that killing babies for birth defects is a bad thing.
Yeah.
Because you can never foresee the future.
Well, in Romulans are definitely into eugenics. They want it. They want to breed the best they can.
Right. So Geordie's going blind. The atmosphere is affecting the interface between his visor and the inputs and that in his brain and that sort of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And the Romulan who got conked by the rockfall is losing the use of his legs, and so they have to really work together. In fact, the Romulan's one who suggests I can do the work of adjusting the connecting the visor and the tricorder,
right,
so that we can detect the neutrino, beacon.
You tell me what to do, and I'll do it. He says, "I'll be your hands," is the way he puts it.
So what's interesting is the Romulan who suggests that. So he's come around, and they realize they have to work together to get out of this. And that's that's the whole Star Trek message, right? We have to work together.
Well, and they admittedly they do the all too convenient. As soon as the Romulan says, "Okay, well, you lead me to the beacon, and we'll get out of here, and we'll deal with it." Then, of course, Geordie immediately goes blind. I mean, immediately he stands up and loses all his sight. It's like, oh, come on. That's one of those writing choices that's a little too convenient.
It is a little too convenient. I do like that Tomalak is basically lying the whole time, saying, "Oh no, it was a one-man craft. One-man craft. You've got the one man. Yep,
one-man craft that just accidentally went off course by a half a light year, and it was just total mistake. And there were two. I was misinformed. It was my small oversight.
Yes, right. Oh, I guess it was a two-man craft. What a surprise.
Yeah.
The Romulan neutral zone. I'm not sure how it works because Federation ships cannot enter the neutral zone without being a violation of the treaty.
Of the treaty.
But Romulan ships seem to be able to go all the way up to the Federation border of the neutral zone with impunity.
Yeah, and I think it's supposed to be like the DMZ between North and South Korea, that you neither
side can enter. Right.
Neither side can enter except for with good reason. But the Federation is very strict. I mean, captains of the Federation get in trouble if they enter into the neutral zone without permission. However, Romulans seem to, through their scheming and politicking, seem to have no problem doing all kinds of stuff within, especially Tomalak. He really likes to go into the neutral zone. It seems like every time we see him, he's in the neutral zone somewhere.
Especially given that they have cloaking devices, they probably go into Federation space all the time.
Well, that's part of this problem is they did go into Federation space and the ship crashed.
Who's the idiot who negotiated the Treaty of Algernon and let the Romulans have cloaks but not the Federation?
And
that's a terrible treaty.
Yeah. And that's actually pointed out that's the episode where the ship phases, Riker's previous ship phased into the rock.
Right.
The captain mentions in that about how, the Federation has always been behind the 8 ball on this. We've always been behind because of this treaty.
Yeah, it was a terrible treaty. I mean, it was a bad idea because it left the Romulans with a decided strategic advantage.
Yep.
That they took advantage of a lot.
Oh, yes.
So I think that's the whole story. I mean, there's not much other than that in the story itself. Do you have any other final notes on this?
Yeah, we've kind of told. I did one thing. I did laugh about how, the Enterprise picks up the initial signal from Tomalak to the shuttlecraft, the crashed ship, and it's not encrypted.
Yeah.
Now, admittedly, this is a time when the idea of having encrypted transmissions and encrypted files and things like that were not well known among the public. This is, again, mid to late 80s. So understandable. But still, it's like nowadays we'd be like, okay, they're just able to watch it without people knowing because it's an open transmission.
I mean, it would take a couple lines of dialogue about, we have their codes, or using an older Romulan code or something along those lines,
Yeah.
But
It's old cold, but it still matches. No.
Right. Which is a Star Wars line? Yeah.
Yep. And then, of course, Wesley is the Wonder Kid who figures out the way that Geordi can communicate back with the Enterprise. And of course, Geordi knows exactly, oh, go Wesley.
Right. It's because, Data isn't capable of doing that. Or never mind the other hundreds of scientists on board or whatever. Right. I know.
And the engineers who are like, communications professionals. And
Yeah, I know. We have to make Wesley the Wonder Kid.
And that's only just to get him in there for, the one scene where I can do this.
Right. It's easy. Oh my gosh. Yeah. Oh,
my God.
Yeah, the ongoing complaints about Wesley. All right, so that's it for the enemy. Let's talk about the feedback I mentioned.
Yay.
Let's see. The first feedback is from our episode 307, which was If Wishes Were Horses. This was a DS9 episode. It was you and me on that one again. Yep. Chris sent an email. I'm just listening to this sequence of Star Trek episode, If Wishes Were Horses. You and Father Cory were wondering about the origin of the episode title. I'm sure you've Googled it. I didn't.
No.
Or someone else has written about it, but it's from a Mother Goose nursery rhyme. And Chris provided a link. If wishes were horses, beggars would ride. If turnips were watches, I would wear one by my side. And if ifs and ands were pots and pans, there'd be no work for tinkers. It's like a lot of old nursery rhymes. What?
Yeah.
Did we just like confusing kids back in the day? But yeah.
I've always liked that line though. Wishes were horses, beggars would ride. I mean, it's just kind of like you can wish all you want. You ain't gonna get it unless you do something about it.
Right, exactly, and that's really that's the sentiment there. But thank you, Chris, for doing this the research on that one for us. And then Andrew sent an email. He says, "Hi, gang. A minor correction from a Catholic Star Trek and SQPN fan from Australia. Sorry, my Boston accent came out.
Oz.
Contrary to what our American friends think, EMU is not pronounced emu, but emu.
Emu.
Mew. So,
well, they did beat you in a war, so
they did beat you
got to pronounce it the way they wanted it to be pronounced.
You beat me on that one because I was going to bring that up.
I love that story.
Yes, the Great Emu War, and the emus won. Look it up, folks. It's true. Then on going way back a year ago to the episode 260, TOS, the alternative factor. Remember that one with the two Lazaruses?
Yep.
TSR wrote on YouTube, how did the good Lazarus destroy the planet in the positive matter universe? I don't remember that.
I don't either.
It's been a long time since I watched it, so.
Yeah. I'm not going to go back and watch it because it wasn't that worth of an episode to watch.
Yeah. I mean, it may have been a plot hole or a writing hole in that, where they didn't follow up on that. But
of those.
Yeah, there were plenty of those. On episode 306, Angel 1, Georgius Rex on YouTube writes, since you mentioned diplomatic marriages, it reminded me of season 2 of Babylon 5. Speaking of Babylon 5. When Susan Ivanova is delegated to handle an alien diplomat whose species concludes their treaties by mating.
Oh,
I just watched that one not long ago.
Great. Gosh, that was great. And then she does this ridiculous dance and
yes. Like she, rather than like, no, she just sort of embraces it and goes over the top. So where the alien had to go, oh no, that's too much for me. That was pretty funny. Yeah, that was Ivanova.
Susan Ivanova is so good.
Yeah, she's really good. And then finally, from our episode 265, also going back, Oasis, the Enterprise episode Oasis. That's the one where they find the father and daughter in the crashed ship, and it's Annie Wershing in her first role, and they had all the holograms.
Oh yeah,
yeah. So JC via YouTube writes, Porque ellos no detectaron que eran hologramas, which means, from Spanish, why didn't they detect that they were all holograms? So, I use Google Translate. I don't speak Spanish.
Well, this Enterprise, so I mean, it's early. They really didn't have an understanding of holograms as they do.
All
later.
That hologram technology was way more advanced than what they had. Yeah.
Yep.
So I think that's the explanation. If this had happened in TNG, Voyager,
later years,
any of those,
they would have recognized it right away.
Yeah, they would have detected there's no life signs, Captain. So, but thank you everyone for your feedback. And if you do happen to send your feedback in a non-English language, I will do my best with Google Translate, but English is my first language. All right. So now we'd like to take a moment to thank our patrons who make it possible for us to create the Secrets of Star Trek, including Brandon D, Floofy Flu, this was the Patreon name, Lisa O, Craig H, and Stephanie W. Floofy Flu, I mean, that
sounds like a rapper or something.
So their generous donations at sqpn.com/give make it possible for us to continue the Secrets of Star Trek and all the shows at StarQuest, and you can join them by visiting sqpn.com/give. And we'd also like to thank Victor Lambs, who edited this episode. So that's it from us. We'd love to know what you thought of this TNG episode, The Enemy. You can let us know by commenting on the show at sqpn.com/trek, our Facebook page, facebook.com/StarQuestMedia. Send an email to trek@sqpn.com. Visit our Discord community at sqpn.com/discord. Or watch The Secrets of Star Trek on our YouTube channel at youtube.com/StarQuestMedia and leave a comment there. We'll be back next time when we'll be discussing a really great Deep Space Nine episode, Little Green Men.
Oh, fantastic.
Until then, Father Cory Sticha, thank you for joining me and sharing The Secrets of Star Trek.
Thank you, Dom.
And once again, I'm Dom Bettinelli. Thank you for listening to The Secrets of Star Trek on StarQuest, and remember, welcome to Galorndon Core, where no good deed goes unpunished.